A waitress brought soup to a sick old lady in a corner booth. 6 weeks later, 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits walked into that same diner and told her she just inherited $340 million. The whole restaurant went silent. Then the cameras showed up. Then the death threat started. Then a powerful family declared war, claiming she'd manipulated a dying woman for money. What happened next became the ugliest inheritance battle Portland had ever seen. And it all started with a $6.50 bowl of chicken soup that would either make Claire Dawson rich beyond imagination or destroy everything she had left. Meet Claire Dawson, 28 years old, single mother, waitress at Riverside Diner in Portland, Oregon. She worked 70-hour weeks across double shifts just to stay afloat. Medical debt from her daughter's asthma treatments had hit $47,000. Her tips barely covered rent. Most nights, she ate whatever the kitchen was throwing out. She was drowning. But she had one rule she never broke. Treat every customer like they mattered, even the ones who looked like they had nothing. That's why she noticed the old woman. Evelyn Marshall started coming in on Tuesday mornings. Always the same corner booth. Always alone. She wore a clean coat, but it was threadbare at the edges. Her hands shook when she lifted the water glass. She never ordered food. Just sat there for hours, staring out the window like she was waiting for something that would never come. Claire recognized that look. It was the look of someone choosing between eating and paying rent. So Claire made choice. She brought Evelyn a bowl of chicken soup and toast. Told her the kitchen had made extra. It was a lie. Claire paid for it out of her own tips. $6.50 she couldn't afford to lose. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears when Claire set the bowl down. She whispered, "Thank you," like it was a prayer. That became their routine. Every Tuesday for 3 weeks, Evelyn showed up. Claire fed her. They talked about books and weather and nothing important. Then one Tuesday, Evelyn didn't come. The corner booth stayed empty. Claire felt the loss deeper than made sense for someone she barely knew. 2 weeks later, the lawyers arrived. They walked in during the lunch rush and asked for Claire Dawson by name. The diner went dead quiet. They had documents, legal papers with official seals. They told her Evelyn Marshall was dead. They told her Evelyn's full name was Evelyn Marshall Hartwell. They told her Evelyn had been worth $340 million. Then they told her it was all Claire's now. Claire stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. This had to be a mistake. She'd served soup to a stranger. That was it. She didn't know anything about Evelyn's life or money or family. The lawyers handed her a sealed envelope with her name on it. Inside was a letter in elegant handwriting. "Dear Claire, you fed me when I was hungry. You saw me when I was invisible. This inheritance isn't charity. It's payment for proving humanity still exists. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Claire thought that was the end of it. She had no idea the nightmare was just beginning, because Evelyn had a family, and they wanted their money back. And they were about to spend millions proving that a poor waitress who showed kindness must have been running a con. The question that would tear through the courtroom, through the media, through every comment section in America was this: can a woman with nothing show kindness to someone with everything without having an agenda? If you want to see how a waitress with nothing defeated a family with everything, subscribe. Because this channel tells stories where character beats privilege every single time. Claire's alarm went off at 5 every morning. The sound cut through the dark like a knife. She'd slap it silent and lie there for 10 seconds, gathering the energy to move. Her body ached before the day even started. 70-hour weeks did that. She'd drag herself out of bed and head straight to Emma's room. Her daughter slept in the only bedroom while Claire took the couch. Emma was 6 years old with asthma that flared up without warning. Claire kept the nebulizer on the nightstand. Most mornings started with breathing treatments, the machine hissing while Emma sat half asleep, the mask covering her small face. "You okay, baby?" Claire would whisper. Emma would nod. She never complained. That broke Claire's heart more than anything. By 5:30, Claire's out the door. 2 buses to get from their apartment in East Portland to the diner in Selwood. The first bus came at 5:40 if she was lucky. If she missed it, she'd be late, and she couldn't afford to be late. Not with the medical bills stacking up. $47,000. That's what they owed. Emma's emergency room visits, the specialists, the medications that insurance barely covered. Claire made $2,100 a month, including tips on good weeks. Rent was $1,200. After utilities and food, there was nothing left. The hospital sent letters every week, payment plans, final notices, threats to send it to collections. She used to have dreams. Veterinary school. She'd wanted it since she was Emma's age. Had the grades for it too. Got accepted to Oregon State. Then she got pregnant at 21, and the father disappeared before Emma was born. Dreams got put away like old clothes that didn't fit anymore. But she had one thing she refused to give up. One piece of dignity in a life that tried to strip it away every day. She treated people like they mattered. The diner opened at 6:30. Claire was always there by 6:15, tying her apron and brewing the first pot of coffee. Riverside Diner wasn't much to look at. Cracked vinyl booths, formica tables with decades of scratches, the smell of bacon grease that never quite left no matter how much they cleaned. But it was steady work, and the regulars were good people. She knew all their names, all their orders. Tommy, the construction worker, came in at 6:45 every morning. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy wheat toast. He'd count out exact change from his pocket, sometimes coming up short by a quarter or 50 cents. Claire always told him the register was off and gave him his food anyway. Mr. Peterson, 73, arrived at 7:15. Oatmeal with brown sugar, orange juice, and he'd sit in booth for reading the newspaper for 2 hours. His hands shook when he lifted his spoon. Claire would refill his coffee without him asking and sit with him for a minute when the morning rush died down. He'd tell her about his late wife. Then there was Marcus, homeless, probably in his 50s, but looked older. He'd come in around 8 and order water, just water. He'd sit at the counter nursing it, try and stay warm. The manager told Claire not to serve him, said he made customers uncomfortable. Claire ignored that. She'd bring Marcus toast, tell him it was about to be thrown out anyway. Another lie she paid for out of her tips. That's who Claire was. She saw people everyone else looked past. She didn't do it for recognition or because she thought it made her special. She did it because her grandfather had raised her that way after her parents left. He'd been a veteran, worked as a school janitor, and he treated every single person, from the principal to the kids who got detention, with the same respect. Everybody's carrying something heavy, he used to say. Least you can do is see them. He died when Claire was 19, but his voice stayed with her. Then one Tuesday morning in October, someone new walked in. It was 8:15. The breakfast rush had cleared out. Claire was wiping down tables when the door chimed. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, looking around like she wasn't sure she was in the right place. She was small, thin, probably in her early 80s. She wore a coat that was clean but worn at the cuffs and collar. Her white hair was pulled back in a neat bun, but it was her posture that caught Claire's attention. Straight-backed, elegant, like she'd been taught to carry herself a certain way and never forgot. The woman walked to the corner booth, the one by the window that nobody ever wanted because the vinyl was torn and the table wobbled. She sat down carefully, folding her hands on the table. Claire grabbed a menu and headed over. "Good morning," Claire said, smiling. "Coffee." The woman looked up. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. They studied Claire's face for a moment before she spoke. "Just water, please." Her voice was soft but clear, educated, the kind of voice that didn't match the threadbare coat. Claire brought her water in a clean glass with ice. Set it down gently. "Take your time looking at the menu. I'll check back in a few minutes." The woman nodded, but didn't pick up the menu. Claire went back to her work, refilled coffee for the couple in booth 2, took an order from a trucker at the counter, but she kept glancing at the corner booth. The old woman just sat there, staring out the window, her hands wrapped around the water glass like she was trying to warm them. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The woman hadn't moved, hadn't ordered, just sat there alone. Claire recognized that look. She'd seen it in the mirror on bad nights. It was the look of someone doing math in their head, counting dollars, deciding what they could afford to lose. Something in Claire's chest tightened. She walked back to the booth. "Have you decided on anything?" The woman glanced up. For just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Embarrassment, maybe, or shame. "No, thank you. I'm fine with water." Claire nodded, smiled, walked away, but her mind was working. 10 minutes later, she came back with a bowl of chicken soup and 2 pieces of toast. Steam rose off the soup. She set it down in front of the woman. "Kitchen made extra," Claire said. "It'll just go to waste if nobody eats it." The woman stared at the bowl, her lips pressed together. Her eyes got shiny. "I didn't order this." "I know, but it's here now, and you look like you could use something warm." The woman's hands trembled as she picked up the spoon. A single tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. Claire smiled. "You're welcome." She walked away before the woman could say anything else, went to the kitchen and told the cook to mark 1 soup and toast on her tab. $6.50. Money she didn't have, but she couldn't walk away from that look in the woman's eyes. The woman, Claire would later learn her name was Evelyn, stayed for another hour. She ate slowly, like she was savoring every bite. When she finally stood to leave, she stopped at the counter where Claire was ringing up another customer. "Thank you," Evelyn said again. "You're very kind." Claire just nodded. "Come back anytime." And she did. Every Tuesday morning, 8:15, same booth, same order just water. And every Tuesday, Claire brought her soup and toast, told her the same lie about the kitchen making extra. They started talking. Small talk at first. The weather. Books Evelyn was reading. Eventually, Evelyn asked about the drawings Emma made that Claire kept in her apron pocket. "My daughter," Claire explained. "She's 6, wants to be an artist." "She has talent," Evelyn said, studying a crayon drawing of a cat. "She has imagination. That's worth more." Evelyn smiled at that, a real smile that made her whole face soften. Claire noticed things about Evelyn over those weeks. The way she watched people, not just casual glancing, real observation. She'd watch Claire interact with Tommy when he came up short on change. Watch how Claire slipped Marcus extra toast. Watch the way Claire remembered Mr. Peterson liked his coffee refilled at exactly 7:30. It was intense, almost uncomfortable, like Evelyn was studying her for a test Claire didn't know she was taking. But Claire didn't mind. She liked Evelyn, looked forward to Tuesday mornings. There was something about the old woman that felt familiar, safe, like talking to her grandfather used to feel. Claire didn't know that bowl of soup would become Exhibit A in a legal battle where kindness itself would go on trial. She didn't know Evelyn Marshall was actually Evelyn Marshall Hartwell, heiress to a tech fortune worth $340 million. She didn't know Evelyn had spent the last 6 months of her life conducting an experiment, testing her wealthy friends, her family, her social circle to see who would help an old woman who looked like she had nothing. And she definitely didn't know that every act of kindness she showed, to Evelyn, to Tommy, to Marcus, to Mr. Peterson, was being carefully observed and recorded in a leather journal that would eventually be submitted as evidence in court. All Claire knew was that an old woman came in on Tuesdays, and she made sure that woman didn't go hungry. That kindness would change her life. But first, it would nearly destroy it. Week 4 came. Tuesday morning, 8:15. Claire glanced at the corner booth while pouring coffee for a regular. Empty. She told herself Evelyn was just running late. Maybe the buses were off schedule. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. 8:30. Still empty. 9 o'clock. The booth stayed vacant. Claire felt a knot forming in her stomach. It was stupid to worry. She barely knew the woman. They talked for maybe 10, 15 minutes, total across 3 weeks. But something felt wrong. The next Tuesday, Claire watched the door. Every time the chime rang, her head snapped up. Every time, it wasn't Evelyn. The corner booth stayed empty all morning. Claire kept glancing at it like Evelyn might materialize if she looked hard enough. By the 3rd Tuesday, Claire knew something had happened. He didn't just stop a routine that consistent without a reason. She thought about asking around, checking hospitals, but she didn't even know Evelyn's last name, didn't have a phone number or address. The old woman had been careful never to share those details. All Claire had was the memory of their conversations and a growing sense of loss that didn't make logical sense. She'd fed a stranger soup 3 times. That was it. So why did the empty booth make her chest ache? She tried to shake it off, went back to work. Life didn't stop for grief, especially when you had bills that wouldn't pay themselves. Then the lawyers walked in. It was a Thursday, lunch rush. The diner was packed with construction crews and office workers on break. Claire was juggling 4 tables and a counter full of people when the door opened and 3 people in suits walked in. They weren't customers. You could tell immediately. Wrong clothes, wrong energy. They stood just inside the doorway, scanning the room like they were looking for someone specific. One of them, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a leather briefcase, walked up to Claire. Claire Dawson. Claire's hands were full of dirty plates. She nodded confused. "Yeah, can I help you?" "We're from Morrison and Chase. We need to speak with you. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" The diner went quiet. People were staring. Claire's manager emerged from the kitchen, looking annoyed. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The woman pulled out a business card. "We're attorneys. We need to speak with Ms. Dawson regarding a legal matter. It won't take long." Claire's stomach dropped. Legal matter. The only legal matters in her life were medical bills and the threat of collections. Had they actually sued her over debt she was trying to pay? "I'm working," Claire said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "This can't wait," the woman said, not unkind but firm. Claire's manager sighed. "Take your break. 10 minutes." Claire set down the plates. Her hands were shaking. She led the 3 lawyers to the corner booth, Evelyn's booth, because it was the only empty spot. The irony didn't hit her until later. She slid into the booth. The 3 lawyers sat across from her. The woman opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Ms. Dawson, my name is Rebecca Morrison. These are my colleagues David Chun and Patricia Wells. We represent the estate of Evelyn Marshall Hartwell." The name meant nothing to Claire at first. Then the first name registered. "Evelyn?" Claire's throat tightened. "Is she okay?" Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Marshall Hartwell passed away 2 weeks ago." The words hit like cold water. 2 weeks. Evelyn had been dead for 2 weeks, and Claire hadn't known. Hadn't even known her full name. She'd just been the old woman in the corner booth who liked chicken soup. "I'm sorry," Claire managed. "I didn't know." "We understand you weren't formally acquainted," Rebecca said. "However, Mrs. Marshall Hartwell left very specific instructions regarding you." Claire blinked. "What?" Rebecca slid a document across the table. Official looking. Lots of legal language in small print. Claire's eyes couldn't focus on the words. They kept blurring. "Mrs. Marshall Hartwell's estate is valued at approximately $340 million, Rebecca said. Her will designates you as the primary beneficiary." The diner sounds faded to white noise. Claire stared at the lawyer, at the document, at the numbers that couldn't possibly be real. "What?" "You're inheriting Mrs. Marshall Hartwell's estate," David Chun said. "The full amount minus estate taxes and a few minor bequests to charities." Claire's brain couldn't process the words. They were speaking English, but it sounded like a foreign language. $340 million. That wasn't a real number. That was a joke, a mistake, a scam. "There has to be some kind of mistake," Claire said. I just brought her soup. I barely knew her." "Mrs. Marshall Hartwell was very clear in her intentions," Rebecca said. "She updated her will 6 weeks ago. Your name is specifically listed." "But why?" Claire's voice cracked. "I'm nobody. I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about her family or her money or—" "She left you a letter," Patricia Wells said. She pulled an envelope from a folder. Cream-colored paper. Expensive. Claire's name was written on the front in elegant cursive. Claire took it with trembling hands. The envelope felt heavy. She opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The same handwriting. Neat. Controlled. "Dear Claire, you fed me when I was hungry. You saw me when I was invisible. That's rarer than you know. This inheritance isn't charity. It's payment for proving humanity still exists. Don't let them tell you otherwise. With gratitude, Yim." Claire read it 3 times. The words didn't make more sense. She looked up at the lawyers, tears blurring her vision. "I don't understand." "Mrs. Marshall Hartwell was a very deliberate woman," Rebecca said. "She knew exactly what she was doing. The will is ironclad. We've already begun the probate process. There are some legal formalities to complete, but the estate should be transferred to you within 60 to 90 days. But her family. She has a nephew, Preston Hartwell. He was named in her previous will, but was removed 6 weeks ago when she made you the beneficiary. Claire's stomach turned. He's going to fight this. That's his right, Rebecca said. But Mrs. Marshall Hartwell anticipated that possibility. She left extensive documentation of her mental competency and her reasoning. We're prepared to defend the will if necessary. The bell above the diner door chimed. Claire barely heard it. Her manager was glaring at her from behind the counter. Her 10 minutes were up. She had tables waiting, orders to take, a life that made sense just 15 minutes ago. Now nothing made sense. I need to get back to work, Claire whispered. Of course. Rebecca stood. We'll be in touch. Here's my card. Please call if you have any questions. In the meantime, don't speak to the media if they contact you. And don't make any major financial decisions until the estate is settled. The media. The word sent a chill down Claire's spine. Why would the media care? The lawyers left. Claire sat in the booth, Evelyn's booth, staring at the letter. The diner noise rushed back. Clattering dishes. Conversations. Someone calling for more coffee. She stood on shaking legs. Walked to the counter. Her manager handed her an order pad. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, Claire lied. Everything's fine. She went back to work, took orders, brought food, smiled at customers. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Evelyn was dead. The old woman who sat quietly in the corner booth, who listened to stories about Emma's drawings, who smiled when Claire brought her soup, gone. And somehow, for reasons Claire couldn't begin to understand, Evelyn had decided Claire deserved everything she'd built in her 82 years of life. Claire thought the grief was the hardest part, losing someone she'd barely known but had come to care about. She was wrong. The real battle was about to begin, and it would force her to prove that kindness wasn't a crime, that a poor woman could show compassion without having an agenda. Within 48 hours, Preston Hartwell would hold a press conference calling her a con artist. Within a week, her face would be on the news with headlines questioning whether she'd manipulated a dying woman. Within 2 weeks, she'd receive death threats. And within 30 days, she'd be sitting in a courtroom fighting for the right to honor a dead woman's final wish, while lawyers argued that people like Claire, poor, uneducated, desperate, couldn't possibly deserve what people like Evelyn had. But she didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was that an old woman had seen something in her worth $340 million. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, Evelyn had seen something Claire had forgotten about herself. Something worth fighting for. Rebecca Morrison called 3 days after the diner meeting. Claire was giving Emma her morning breathing treatment when the phone rang. We need you to come to the estate, Rebecca said. There are documents you need to sign. And Mrs. Marshall Hartwell left specific instructions about showing you the property. Claire arranged for her neighbor to watch Emma. Took 2 buses to Portland's West Hills, where houses hid behind gates and trees. The address Rebecca gave her didn't make sense at first. She double-checked it 3 times. The estate sat at the end of a private drive. Iron gates, stone walls. Claire stood outside, staring. This couldn't be right. Evelyn, the woman who wore threadbare coats and ordered water, lived here? Rebecca's car pulled up behind her. The lawyer got out, pressed a code into the gate panel. The gate swung open silently. Come on, Rebecca said. They drove up a winding driveway lined with old-growth trees. The house appeared gradually through the branches. 3 stories. Gray stone. Dozens of windows. Claire's entire apartment building could fit inside it twice. 30 rooms, Rebecca said, like she was reading Claire's mind. Built in 1924. Evelyn's grandfather started Hartwell Technologies in the basement. The company's worth billions now, though the family sold most of their shares decades ago. Claire couldn't speak. She got out of the car and stared up at the mansion. Evelyn had lived here, alone, in 30 rooms. Rebecca unlocked the front door. It was heavy wood with stained glass panels. Inside, the entry hall had marble floors and a staircase that curved up to the 2nd floor. Everything was immaculate, expensive, the kind of place Claire had only seen in movies. Evelyn had a cleaning service, Rebecca explained, but she lived mostly in the East Wing, kept the rest of the house closed off. They walked through rooms that felt like a museum. A dining room with a table that could seat 20. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A sitting room with furniture that looked too perfect to actually sit on. Every room had photographs on the walls or side tables. Claire stopped at one. Evelyn, maybe 30 years old, in an evening gown. She stood next to a man in a tuxedo at what looked like a formal event. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her husband, Rebecca said. Richard Hartwell. He died in 1998. More photographs. Evelyn shaking hands with men in business suits. Evelyn cutting ribbons at building openings. Evelyn at charity galas, surrounded by people in expensive clothes. In every photo, she looked elegant, composed, alone even when surrounded by people. Then there were the family portraits. Evelyn with a teenage boy who must have been Preston. His hand on her shoulder looked more possessive than affectionate. His smile had the same emptiness as everyone else's in these photos. She never had children of her own, Rebecca said quietly. Preston is her late husband's nephew. He's the only family she had left. They climbed the stairs to the second floor. Rebecca led Claire down a long hallway to a set of double doors. She pushed them open. The room inside was different from the rest of the house. A desk sat by the window overlooking the garden. Bookshelves lined every wall, packed with volumes. But what made Claire's breath catch were the journals. Hundreds of them. Leather-bound books stacked on shelves, organized by year. They went back decades. The spines were labeled in neat handwriting. 1965, 1970, 1985, 2000. All the way to 2024. Evelyn kept journals her entire adult life, Rebecca said. She left instructions that you were to have access to all of them. Claire walked slowly into the room. It smelled like old paper and leather. She pulled out a journal from 1975, opened it carefully. Evelyn's handwriting filled every page. Neat, precise. Notes about meetings, observations about people, thoughts on books she'd read. Why would she want me to see these? Claire asked. I think she wanted you to understand her, Rebecca said. To know who she really was. Claire pulled out another journal. 1998. The year Evelyn's husband died. The entries were different here. Raw. More emotional. Claire felt like she was intruding on something deeply private. She put that journal back and reached for the most recent one. 2024. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first entry was from January. Evelyn describing her terminal cancer diagnosis. Stage 4. 6 months to live, maybe less. The writing was matter of fact. Clinical, like she was describing someone else's illness. Claire flipped through the pages. Months of entries. Doctor appointments. Medication side effects. But also observations about people. About society. About wealth. Then she found the entry from August. I've made a decision. I want to know if kindness still exists in people who have nothing to gain from showing it. I'm going to test them. All of them. The friends who smile at charity events. The family who calls when they need money. I'll show them who I really am. Someone with nothing, and see who helps. The next entries detailed Evelyn's experiment. She described attending a charity gala dressed in clothes from a thrift store. Her friends didn't recognize her. When she approached them, they called security. She visited her country club as a guest of a member, pretending to be someone's poor relative. She was asked to leave. They only ever saw the money, Evelyn wrote. Not me. Never me. Claire turned the page. September entries. Evelyn described visiting working-class neighborhoods, diners, laundromats, bus stops, looking for something she'd lost. Then Claire found her own name, September 18th. Found a diner in Selwood, Riverside Diner. Watched a young waitress for 3 hours today. Claire Dawson, 28, single mother. She wore exhaustion like a second skin, but she smiled at every customer. Really smiled, like she saw them. The construction worker who counted change. She gave him his breakfast and said the register was off. The homeless man who ordered water. She brought him toast. She paid for herself. She didn't know anyone was watching. She just did it. Claire's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes and kept reading. September 25th. Watched Claire again. She remembers everyone's names. Their orders. She asks the elderly man about his late wife. Sits with him when the diner's slow. She treats the businessman in the suit the same as the laborer in dirty jeans. No performance. No calculation. just decency. October 2nd. Decided to approach her today. Ordered water. Couldn't bring myself to order food. Wanted to see what she'd do. She noticed. I could see her noticing. The way she looked at me. Recognition, not of who I am, but of what I was feeling. She brought me soup without asking. Said the kitchen made extra. A lie she paid for out of her own pocket. I cried. First time in years. The entries continued. Week by week. Evelyn describing their brief conversations. Claire's stories about Emma. The way Claire never asked personal questions, but somehow made Evelyn feel seen anyway. October 23rd. This is who deserves it. Not Preston, who calls once a year. Not the foundation board members who smile while stealing from charity accounts. Not the friends who forgot me the moment I couldn't write checks. Claire Dawson, who has nothing, gives everything. She doesn't perform kindness, she lives it. This is who deserves to carry forward what I built. Claire's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the journal. She flipped to the final entries. October 29th. 3 days before Evelyn died. Updated my will today. Rebecca thinks I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am, but I've never been more certain of anything. Claire Dawson. Emma Dawson, born April 15th, 2018. I've watched them for 2 months. Studied them. This is an impulse. This is the most carefully considered decision of my life. If Preston fights this, when Preston fights this, it will prove exactly why he doesn't deserve it. Character isn't inherited through blood. It's demonstrated through action. The final line made Claire's breath catch. I won't be here to defend my choice, but Claire will, and I believe she's stronger than she knows. Rebecca stood in the doorway, watching quietly. She knew, Claire whispered. She knew her family would fight this. Yes, Rebecca said, and she prepared for it anyway. Claire closed the journal carefully, placed it back on the shelf. Her mind was reeling. Evelyn hadn't been a confused old woman who made an impulsive decision. She'd been conducting an experiment, testing the world. And somehow, Claire had passed a test she didn't know she was taking. What do I do now? Claire asked. Rebecca's expression was grim. You prepare for war. The news broke 2 days later. Claire was at home with Emma when her phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. Over and over. She ignored the first few. Then her neighbor knocked on the door. Claire, there are news vans outside. Claire looked out the window. 3 vans with satellite dishes parked on the street. Reporters with cameras. People with notepads. All staring at her building. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. Her manager from the diner. Claire, what the hell is going on? There are reporters here asking about you and some rich dead lady. I can explain. Don't bother. You're suspended. Effective immediately. Can't have this circus affecting business. He hung up. Claire's hands went numb. She turned on the TV. Flipped to the local news. Her own face stared back at her from the screen. A photo someone must have pulled from social media. She looked exhausted in it. Hair pulled back. Still in her uniform. The caption read, Waitress inherits $340 million. Family cries foul. The news anchor's voice was neutral, but the implications weren't. Preston Hartwell, nephew of the late Evelyn Marshall Hartwell, held a press conference this afternoon challenging his aunt's will. Hartwell claims his aunt suffered from dementia and was taken advantage of by a service worker who befriended her in the final months of her life. The screen cut to a man in an expensive suit, Preston Hartwell, 54 years old, graying hair perfectly styled. He stood behind a podium with his lawyers flanking him. My aunt was a brilliant woman, Preston said. His voice was smooth, practiced, but in her final months, she wasn't herself. She was sick, confused, vulnerable, and someone took advantage of that vulnerability. He paused. Let that sink in. Claire Dawson is a stranger who brought my aunt soup a few times. That's it. No relationship. No history. Yet somehow, she convinced my aunt to leave her everything. We believe Ms. Dawson specifically targeted my aunt, learned about her wealth, and manipulated a dying woman for financial gain. Claire's stomach turned. She watched herself get character assassinated on live television. We're filing a legal challenge to the will, Preston continued, and we're pursuing a full investigation into Ms. Dawson's conduct. My aunt deserves justice. Her legacy deserves protection. Questions from reporters. Flashing cameras. Preston's lawyers spoke about mental competency laws and undue influence. They made it sound so reasonable, so logical. The screen cut back to the anchor. We reached out to Ms. Dawson for comment, but received no response. Because Claire was standing in her apartment with her mouth open, unable to process what was happening. The next segment was worse. A split screen. On the left, a photo of Evelyn at some society event. She wore diamonds, an elegant gown. She looked regal, powerful. On the right, Claire's photo. Tired eyes, cheap uniform. The visual contrast told a story without words. Who was Claire Dawson? The anchor asked. And how did a waitress earning minimum wage convince a millionaire to leave her everything? They cut to footage of Riverside Diner. Reporters shoving cameras in customers' faces. Did you know Claire Dawson? Did she ever talk about befriending wealthy customers? Claire's phone buzzed with a text. Rebecca Morrison. Don't talk to anyone. Don't go outside. Don't respond to reporters. I'll handle this. But it was too late to handle anything. The story had already spread. Claire checked social media and immediately regretted it. Twitter was on fire. Facebook groups dedicated to discussing the case. TikTok videos with millions of views analyzing whether she was a con artist. The comments were brutal. Gold digger got caught. Poor woman befriends dying millionaire and suddenly inherits everything? Yeah, nothing suspicious there. This is why rich people can't trust anyone. She literally waited until the woman died to cash in. Disgusting. Some people defended her. Not many. Mostly they were drowned out by the mob convinced she'd manipulated a vulnerable old woman. By evening, the tabloids had picked it up. Claire saw the headlines on her phone. Waitress befriends dying heiress. Steals $340 million fortune. Family claims soup came with a price tag. Poor single mothers, get-rich-quick scheme exposed. They printed the worst photo of her they could find. One where she looked half asleep after a double shift. Next to it, another elegant photo of Evelyn. The message was clear. Look at the difference between them. Look at who deserves wealth and who doesn't. Emma came out of her room, holding her stuffed rabbit. Mom, why are people outside? Claire pulled her daughter close. It's nothing, baby. Just some confusion. It'll go away. But it wouldn't go away. And Claire knew it. Her phone rang again. Rebecca. We need to meet, the lawyer said. Tomorrow. My office. This is going to get much worse before it gets better. How much worse can it get? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Preston's legal team is very good, and he's playing to public opinion. Right now, you're losing in the court of public opinion, and that affects everything else. Claire looked at Emma, who'd gone back to her room, at the news van still parked outside, at the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. She was losing everything while fighting for everything, and the battle had barely begun. Rebecca's office was downtown, 23rd floor. Claire had never been in a building that tall. The elevator made her ears pop. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rebecca sat at a long table covered in documents. Evelyn's journals were stacked in neat piles. I've been reading these, Rebecca said, gesturing to the journals. Every single one from the past year. And Claire, this is extraordinary. She opened one of the journals to a marked page. September, before Claire had even met Evelyn. Read this, Rebecca said. Claire took the journal. The entry was dated September 1st, 2024. Dr. Patel gave me 6 months, maybe less. The cancer's spreading faster than expected. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving everything to people who never cared about me. Preston calls when he needs money. The foundation board steals from charity accounts. My so-called friends haven't visited in years. I built an empire, and I'm surrounded by vultures waiting for me to die. There has to be someone, somewhere, someone who shows kindness without expecting payment. I'm going to find them, and they're going to inherit everything. Rebecca flipped to another marked entry. September 10th. Tested Margaret Winters today. We've been friends for 40 years. I dressed in worn clothes and asked her for coffee at a diner instead of the country club. She looked at me like I was homeless, made an excuse, and left. Friendship of 4 decades. Gone the moment I couldn't afford the right restaurants. Another entry. September 15th. Went to the charity gala in a thrift store dress. Wanted to see if anyone would talk to me. They didn't recognize me. When I approached the table where I've sat for 20 years, security was called. They removed me from my own charity event. These people don't see me. They see my checkbook. Claire's throat tightened. She kept reading. September 20th. Found Riverside Diner. Watched a waitress named Claire. She paid for a homeless man's breakfast out of her own tips. Didn't tell anyone. Just did it. I've watched dozens of people over the past 3 weeks. She's the first one who passed the test without knowing she was being tested. October 1st. Approached Claire today. She brought me soup without asking. I told her I couldn't afford it. She lied and said the kitchen made extra. I know what that lie cost her. I've been watching her count tips. She lives on the edge of financial collapse, but she still gives to people who have even less. This is real. This is what I've been looking for. October 10th. Claire doesn't perform kindness for an audience. She does it when no one's watching. That's the difference. The people at the galas, the charity boards, my own family, they perform. They want credit. Claire just is. She treats the homeless man with the same respect as the businessman. She remembers the elderly man's dead wife's name. She asks about people's lives because she actually cares. How is this person working minimum wage while people like Preston inherit millions? Rebecca pulled out another journal. October 23rd. The entry Claire had read at the estate, but Rebecca pointed to a section she'd missed. I know what people will say when I die, and this will become public. They'll call her a gold digger, a con artist. They'll say she manipulated me. Let them. It will prove my point. Society can't accept that a poor woman might deserve wealth more than a rich man. That kindness might be worth more than bloodlines. If Preston fights this, when he fights this, he'll expose exactly why he doesn't deserve a single dollar. And Claire will have to defend herself, which will show everyone who she really is. She's stronger than she knows. She'll win. Claire's eyes burned. She knew. She knew all of this would happen. She planned for it, Rebecca said. Look at this. She opened a folder with medical documents. 3 weeks before she died, Evelyn had herself evaluated by 2 psychiatrists and a neurologist. Full cognitive testing. She scored in the 95th percentile for her age group. No signs of impairment. She documented everything. She wanted to make sure no one could claim she was incompetent. Rebecca pulled out another document, a notarized statement dated 3 weeks before Evelyn's death. I, Evelyn Marshall Hartwell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby state that my decision to name Claire Dawson as primary beneficiary of my estate is made with full mental capacity and complete understanding of the implications. I have observed Ms. Dawson for 2 months and found her to possess moral character superior to any member of my biological family. This is not a decision made in confusion or under influence. This is the most carefully considered choice of my life. 3 witnesses had signed it. Evelyn's doctor, her longtime attorney, a psychiatrist. Claire stared at the documents. Why didn't she just tell me? Why didn't she explain? Because then it wouldn't have been real, Rebecca said softly. She needed to know you be kind without expecting anything in return. The moment you knew she had money, everything would have changed. Claire thought about those Tuesday mornings, the quiet conversations, the way Evelyn watched her. It hadn't been random at all. It had been the most important test of Claire's life, and she'd had no idea she was taking it. So what happens now? Claire asked. Now we use these journals in court, Rebecca said. We show that Evelyn was brilliant, methodical, and absolutely certain about her choice. We prove that you earned this inheritance through character, not manipulation. Claire looked at the stack of journals. 60 years of Evelyn's life, her thoughts, her loneliness, her desperate search for genuine human connection in a world that only valued her money. Was this inheritance about the money? Claire asked. Or was she trying to prove something? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I think she was trying to prove that character matters more than wealth, that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account. She chose you because you're everything her family isn't, and she knew that defending her choice would force the world to question everything they believe about who deserves what. Claire closed the journal carefully. Outside the window, Portland spread out below. Millions of people. How many of them were like her, working themselves to exhaustion, showing kindness that went unnoticed. Invisible to people like Preston Hartwell. Evelyn had seen her, had chosen her, not randomly, not out of confusion, but deliberately, after weeks of observation and careful consideration. Now Claire had to prove she deserved that choice. And the only way to do that was to fight. The legal motion came 3 days later. Preston's attorneys filed in Multnomah County Court. Motion to freeze the estate pending mental competency hearing. Attached were Evelyn's medical records showing an early-stage dementia diagnosis from 8 months earlier. Rebecca called Claire immediately. Don't panic. The diagnosis is preliminary. We have later records showing complete cognitive function. But they have records that say she had dementia, Claire said. Her voice was shaking. That's all a jury will hear. We'll counter it. Trust me. But trust was getting harder. That afternoon, 2 people in suits knocked on Claire's door. She opened it cautiously. Claire Dawson? Yes. We're from Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you about your daughter. Claire's blood turned to ice. What? We received a report that you're experiencing mental health difficulties, that you're using your daughter to manipulate elderly individuals. We need to conduct a home visit and interview Emma. That's insane. Who reported this? Reports are confidential. May we come in? Claire's hands trembled as she opened the door wider. The CPS workers spent 2 hours in her apartment, looking through cabinets, checking the bathroom, asking Emma questions. Her daughter looked terrified. Mommy didn't do anything wrong, Emma kept saying. Mommy's good. After they left, Claire sat on the floor and cried. Emma climbed into her lap. Did I say something bad? Emma asked. No, baby. You were perfect. But nothing felt perfect. The system was mobilizing against her. Preston's team had triggered a CPS investigation with an anonymous tip that was complete fiction. They were using every weapon they had. The next morning, reporters had the CPS story. Child Protective Services investigating Waitress, who inherited fortune. The implication was clear. Even the authorities thought something was wrong. Rebecca called again. Preston's team filed additional motions. They're calling character witnesses, people from Portland's high society who'll testify that Evelyn's mental state declined rapidly in her final months. Did it? Claire asked. Physically, yes. She was dying of cancer. Mentally? The medical evidence says no. But Preston's team will paint a picture of a confused, sick woman who was vulnerable to manipulation. That afternoon, Claire received a letter, hand-delivered by courier. Expensive paper. Law, firm letterhead. Ms. Dawson, we represent Mr. Preston Hartwell in the matter of the Marshall Hartwell estate. Our client wishes to avoid costly litigation. He's prepared to offer you $500,000 to withdraw your claim to the estate. This is a generous settlement that would resolve this matter quickly and quietly. Please consider carefully. If you proceed to trial and lose, you'll receive nothing. The offer expires in 48 hours. $500,000. More money than Claire would earn in 15 years of waitressing. Enough to pay off Emma's medical debt, with plenty left over. Enough to start over somewhere reporters weren't camped outside a building. All she had to do was walk away. Claire stared at the letter, at the signature from some lawyer she'd never met, at the number that would end her nightmare. She thought about Evelyn, about the journals, about the careful, deliberate choice Evelyn had made after months of observation. Don't let them tell you otherwise. That's what Evelyn had written. Don't let them convince you that you're not worthy, that your kindness was calculated, that people like you don't deserve what people like them have. Walking away would prove Preston right. It would say that Evelyn's judgment, the most carefully considered decision of her brilliant life, was incompetent madness. It would say that poor people who show kindness must have ulterior motives. Claire picked up her phone, called Rebecca. I got the settlement offer, she said. And tell them no. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. You're sure? Trial's going to be brutal. Preston's team is going to tear apart every moment of your life. And if you lose... I lose, Claire said. But I'm not fighting for money anymore. I'm fighting for Evelyn, for her right to choose who deserved her legacy. Walking away would betray that. Okay, Rebecca said. Then we prepare for war. The trial date was set. 45 days. Not enough time to build a defense that could compete with Preston's unlimited resources. But it was all they had. The enemy had emerged, and they were just getting started. This is exactly the kind of impossible choice that changes everything. Subscribe to see stories where ordinary people face extraordinary decisions and discover they're stronger than the system betting against them. The next 3 weeks were hell. Preston's legal team was everywhere. They filed motion after motion, discovery requests, depositions. They subpoenaed Claire's bank records, phone records, employment history. They interviewed everyone she'd ever worked with at the diner. They built their case brick by brick. Their strategy was simple. Paint Claire as a calculating predator who'd researched Evelyn, learned about her wealth, and deliberately targeted her. They had surveillance footage. Someone had pulled security camera recordings from the diner showing Claire serving Evelyn. Week after week, they argued it proved premeditation. Look how many times she approached her. Look how she singled her out. Never mind that Claire served everyone. Never mind that the footage also showed her bringing food to Marcus, sitting with Mr. Peterson, helping Tommy when he was short on change. Preston's lawyers edited those parts out. They showed only the moments with Evelyn. They brought in character witnesses, people Claire had never met. Portland's social elite who'd known Evelyn from charity events and foundation boards. Her mental state declined significantly in her final year. One woman testified at a pre-trial hearing. She forgot names, repeated herself. She wasn't the same woman we'd known. Did you visit her? Rebecca asked on cross-examination. The woman hesitated. No, but I heard from others. So you didn't actually witness her alleged decline. You heard rumors. We all knew she wasn't well. Yet no one visited her. The woman looked uncomfortable. We wanted to give her privacy. Rebecca let that answer hang in the air. But the damage was done. The narrative was building. Evelyn was sick, confused, vulnerable. They brought in financial experts who analyzed the timeline. Evelyn was diagnosed with early-stage dementia in February. She met Claire in September. She changed her will in October. The progression was clear, they argued. Her mental state declined, making her susceptible to influence. They showed photos of Claire's debt, hospital bills, collection notices, eviction warnings, $47,000 in medical debt, $2,000 in her checking account. The message was obvious. This is a woman who was desperate. The judge set the trial date, December 18th, 6 weeks away. Claire met with her assigned public defender. His name was David. He was 29 and handling 50 other cases. He looked exhausted. I'll be honest, David said. We're outmatched. Preston has 6 lawyers on his team. Corporate law firms. Unlimited resources. I'm one guy with a stack of cases and no budget. So I'm going to lose, Claire said flatly. I didn't say that, but you need to be realistic about what we're facing. Claire went home that night feeling hollower than she had since this started. Emma was already asleep. Claire sat on the couch and stared at nothing. The apartment felt smaller, darker. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Dawson? My name is Margaret Chin. I'm an attorney. I'd like to discuss your case. I already have a public defender. I know. I want to replace him. Claire sat up straighter. Why? Because I know what you're going through. 5 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's. My brother sued for guardianship, claiming she wasn't competent to make her own decisions. He wanted control of her assets. We fought in court for 8 months. I watched lawyers tear apart my mother's character and intelligence, watched them reduce a brilliant woman to a collection of symptoms. I was a corporate attorney then, working for the kind of firm Preston hired. I quit after that trial, started doing family law and elder advocacy. When I saw your case on the news, I knew I had to call. I can't afford. Pro bono, Margaret said. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because your case is about something bigger than inheritance. It's about whether we trust people, especially elderly people, to make their own choices. Whether we respect their judgment or assume they're incompetent the moment they do something that doesn't fit our expectations. Claire was quiet for a long moment. What happened with your mother? We won. She retained her independence. She lived on her own terms until she died 2 years ago. But the fight almost destroyed us. I don't want that to happen to you. It's already destroying me. Then let's fight back properly. I've handled dozens of cases like this. I know how Preston's team thinks. I used to be one of them. Claire looked at the letter from Evelyn sitting on her coffee table. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Okay, Claire said. What do we do? Margaret came to Claire's apartment the next day. She was 42, Korean-American, with sharp eyes and a briefcase full of documents. First, we need to rebuild the narrative, Margaret said. Right now, Preston controls the story. Old woman meets struggling waitress, gets manipulated, changes her will. We need to show what really happened, that Evelyn was conducting an experiment, that she chose you deliberately after careful observation, that this was an impulse. It was the most rational decision she ever made. How do we prove that? The journals. Rebecca gave me copies. They're extraordinary. Evelyn documented everything. Her thought process, her observations, the other people she tested who failed. This is a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Margaret spread out documents on Claire's tiny kitchen table. We'll subpoena Evelyn's complete medical records, not just the preliminary dementia diagnosis, but all the follow-ups, the cognitive testing she had done specifically for the will, the psychiatric evaluations. Will show that yes, she had early-stage dementia, but her executive function was intact. She could still make complex decisions. Will the jury believe that? They will when we're done. We're also going to interview everyone from the diner. Tommy, Mr. Peterson, Marcus. We'll establish your character through people who actually know you, not Portland society people who never met you. Margaret pulled out another document. And we're going to investigate Preston. What? Rebecca mentioned something about embezzlement. I have a private investigator who specializes in financial crimes. If Preston has been stealing from a family company, that's motive. He doesn't just want the inheritance. He needs it to cover his tracks. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret worked like a machine. She deposed the diner staff. She interviewed the regulars who'd witnessed Claire's kindness for months before Evelyn ever appeared. She built a timeline showing that Claire's behavior hadn't changed when Evelyn showed up. This was who Claire had always been. She subpoenaed Evelyn's medical records and found something Preston's team hadn't included. 2 weeks before changing her will, Evelyn had undergone extensive cognitive testing at her own request. She'd scored above average on every measure. Memory, reasoning, judgment, all intact. Why wasn't this in the medical records Preston submitted? Claire asked. Because it doesn't fit their narrative, Margaret said. They cherry-picked the diagnosis and ignored the follow-ups. We're going to shove this in their faces in court. Margaret's investigator, retired FBI agent named Tom, dug into Preston's finances. What he found was damning. Preston had been CFO of Hartwell Technologies until 2 years ago. He'd been fired, officially listed as retirement. But Tom found board minutes showing they'd caught him embezzling funds. $2 million siphoned through fake vendor accounts. The company hadn't pressed charges to avoid bad publicity, but they'd forced him out and demanded repayment. Preston had been making payments, but he was behind, way behind. He owed $1.8 million, and his payment plan required a lump sum by the end of the year. He was counting on inheriting, Margaret said. When Evelyn changed her will, he didn't just lose an inheritance. He lost his way out of potential prison time. Can we use this in court? Absolutely. It's motive. He needs Claire to lose. The pieces were coming together, but so were Preston's attacks. 3 weeks before trial, Margaret found security footage from Evelyn's mansion. The house had cameras everywhere, a security system Evelyn had installed years ago but rarely monitored. Margaret sat Claire down and pulled up the footage on her laptop. Watch this, Margaret said. The video was dated September 12th, before Claire had even met Evelyn. It showed Evelyn leaving her house dressed in the worn coat Claire would come to recognize. She looked frail but purposeful. The timestamp showed 7:30 a.m. Margaret fast-forwarded. She left the house 43 times in September and October. Always dressed the same way. Always going to different locations. Watch where she goes. The footage cut to different dates. Different locations caught by traffic cameras and business security Tom had accessed. Evelyn at a charity gala dressed in thrift store clothes. Evelyn at a coffee shop. Evelyn at a bus stop. Each time, she interacted with people. Each time, they ignored her or turned her away. Then the footage from Riverside Diner. Exterior camera from across the street. September 18th, Evelyn entering. She sat in the corner booth. Claire appeared, bringing water. Then soup. The timestamp showed it matched Evelyn's journal entry exactly. But what made Claire's breath catch was what happened next. The camera caught Evelyn alone at the table. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse. Wrote something. Even from the grainy footage, you could see her hand was steady. Her movements deliberate. She wasn't confused or impaired. She was conducting an experiment and taking notes. "This changes everything," Margaret said. "This shows premeditation on Evelyn's part, not yours. She was testing people. You were part of a deliberate social experiment conducted by a brilliant woman. This wasn't manipulation. This was science." Claire stared at the screen, at Evelyn sitting alone in that booth, writing in her notebook, planning, observing, choosing. "How did you find this?" Claire asked. "Tom's good at his job, and we got lucky. The diner's landlord has security cameras. He was willing to share footage once we explained the situation." Margaret saved the video and closed her laptop. "This is what we'll show in court, not just the journals, but visual proof that Evelyn was conducting a methodical experiment, that every choice she made was deliberate." "Will it be enough?" "I don't know," Margaret said honestly. "Preston's team is good. They'll argue that planning an experiment doesn't mean she had the capacity to understand its consequences. They'll say the early dementia diagnosis impaired her judgment even if she appeared functional. So what do? We keep building the case, and we prepare you for testimony. Because, Claire, you're going to have to take the stand. You're going to have to tell the jury who Evelyn was to you, and they're going to try to destroy you." Then Margaret found the final piece. Security footage from October 29th, 3 days before Evelyn died. The video showed Evelyn in her attorney's office. She looked thin, sick, but her eyes were clear. The footage had audio. Evelyn spoke directly to the camera. "My name is Evelyn Marshall Hartwell. I'm recording this of my own free will and complete mental capacity. In 3 days, I'll meet with my attorney to finalize my will. I know my family will challenge this decision. I know they'll claim I wasn't in my right mind. So I'm creating this record now while I still can." She paused, gathering strength. "I've spent the last 6 months testing people. My friends, my family, strangers. I dressed as someone with nothing and watched how they treated me. Everyone failed. Everyone except one person. Claire Dawson, a waitress who fed me when I was hungry, who saw me when I was invisible, who showed me kindness without knowing who I was or what I had. I'm leaving her everything because she earned it, not through blood or connections, but through character. If you're watching this, it means my family is fighting my decision. Let me be clear, I was never more certain of anything in my life than I am of this choice." The video ended. Margaret and Claire sat in silence. "That's it," Margaret finally said. "That's what wins the case. Evelyn's own testimony. Preston's team can argue all they want about dementia and incompetence, but the jury will see a dying woman clear-eyed and determined, defending her choice." For the first time since this nightmare began, Claire felt something that might have been hope. Maybe they had a chance after all. The trial started December 18th, Multnomah County Courthouse. Claire wore a borrowed suit Margaret had gotten from a thrift store. Nothing fancy. They didn't want her to look like she was already spending Evelyn's money. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but they lined the hallway outside. Preston sat at the plaintiff's table with his 6 attorneys. He wore a perfect suit and an expression of wounded dignity. Claire sat next to Margaret. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Rebecca, entered. Everyone stood. Claire's legs barely held her. "Be seated," Judge Morrison said. "We're here for the matter of Marshall Hartwell estate challenge. Mr. Hartwell, you may present your opening statement." Preston's lead attorney stood. His name was Richard Cole, 60 years old, silver hair, the kind of man who commanded attention just by existing. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began. "This case is about a vulnerable elderly woman who was taken advantage of in the final months of her life. Evelyn Marshall Hartwell was brilliant, accomplished, but she was also sick, dying. And in her vulnerability, she was manipulated by someone who recognized an opportunity. He gestured to Claire without looking at her. The defendant, Claire Dawson, is a 28-year-old waitress with crushing debt, $47,000 owed to hospitals, living paycheck to paycheck. Then she meets Evelyn Marshall Hartwell, a woman worth $340 million. Over the course of just a few weeks, Ms. Dawson cultivates a relationship with Mrs. Hartwell, brings her food, talks with her, befriends her, and somehow, a woman she barely knows changes her will to leave Ms. Dawson everything. Cole pulled out documents. Will show that Mrs. Hartwell had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia 8 months before meeting Ms. Dawson. Will show her mental capacity was declining. Will show that Ms. Dawson's actions fit a classic pattern of elder manipulation. And we'll ask you to restore Mrs. Hartwell's previous will, the one written when she was undeniably competent, leaving her estate to her family. He sat down. The jury looked at Claire. She could see the judgment in their eyes. They'd already decided. Margaret stood. She was smaller than Cole, younger, less impressive, but her voice cut through the courtroom. Your Honor, members of the jury, Mr. Cole just told you a story. It's a compelling story. Rich old woman, poor young woman, convenient inheritance. But it's fiction. The truth is much more interesting. Margaret walked toward the jury box. Evelyn Marshall Hartwell spent her entire life surrounded by people who wanted her money, family who called when they needed cash, friends who smiled at charity events but disappeared when the checks stopped coming. So in the last months of her life, she conducted an experiment. She wanted to know if genuine kindness still existed, if anyone would help an old woman who appeared to have nothing. Margaret pulled out a journal. This is Evelyn's diary, in her own handwriting. She documents testing dozens of people, her friends, her family. All of them failed. Then she met Claire Dawson, a waitress who fed her without expecting payment, who treated her with dignity when everyone else looked through her. Evelyn didn't change her will on impulse. She did it after careful observation and documented consideration. We'll prove that Evelyn Marshall Hartwell was brilliant until the day she died, and that her final choice, choosing character over bloodlines, was the most rational decision she ever made. Margaret sat down. The jury looked less certain now. The trial began. Preston's team called their witnesses. Medical experts testified about dementia progression, how even early-stage diagnosis affects judgment, how patients can appear functional while experiencing significant cognitive decline. Could someone with Mrs. Hartwell's diagnosis make complex financial decisions? Cole asked. It's questionable, the expert said. Early-stage dementia often affects executive function, the ability to plan, to understand consequences. She might have seemed rational in conversation, but lacked capacity for this kind of decision. Margaret cross-examined. Did you ever examine Mrs. Hartwell? No, but based on the medical records. So you're offering an opinion about a patient you never met, based on incomplete records? The diagnosis is clear. We'll see about that. Preston's team showed the surveillance footage from a diner. Claire serving Evelyn, week after week. They froze frames on moments that looked suspicious when taken out of context. Claire leaning in close to talk. Claire sitting with Evelyn. Claire bringing her food. Look at the pattern, Cole said. Ms. Dawson specifically targeted Mrs. Hartwell, week after week, cultivating this relationship. They called character witnesses, society people who described Evelyn's decline, how she forgot names, missed events, seemed confused. When did you last speak with her? Margaret asked one witness. About a year before she died. So you're describing her mental state from a year ago, not from the period when she changed her will? Yes. Thank you. But the damage accumulated, hour by hour, day by day. The portrait being painted was damaging. Confused old woman, desperate young woman, manipulation disguised as kindness. Then came the betrayal. Day 3. Preston's team called Tom Mitchell, Claire's former manager from the diner. Tom took the stand. He wouldn't look at Claire. Mr. Mitchell, how long did Ms. Dawson work for you? Cole asked. 2 years. And did she ever discuss her financial situation? Yeah. She was always complaining about money. Said she needed to find a rich husband or something. Claire's stomach dropped. That was a lie. She'd never said anything like that. Did she ever mention befriending customers for money? Tom hesitated. Just a second. Then, yeah, after that old lady started coming in, Claire joked about landing a rich one. Said maybe bringing soup was an investment. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison called for order. Claire grabbed Margaret's arm. That's not true, she whispered. I never said that. Margaret's face was stone. I know, but it was under oath. It was testimony, and it fit Preston's narrative perfectly. Margaret cross-examined, but Tom stuck to his story. He'd been coached, probably paid. Claire could see it in how carefully he answered, like he was reciting memorized lines. When Tom left the stand, the jury looked at Claire with open suspicion. That night, the media tore her apart. Waitress bragged about landing rich old lady. Former manager testifies. Damning testimony reveals calculated plan to manipulate heiress. Claire sat in her apartment while Emma slept. Her phone buzzed with hate messages, death threats, people she'd never met telling her she should die. Margaret called. Don't read the news. Too late. Tom lied. We both know it. Tomorrow we start our defense. We'll show the truth. Will it matter? They already hate me. The jury matters, not Twitter. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you testify. Claire didn't sleep. She sat on the couch and read Evelyn's letter over and over. Don't let them tell you otherwise. The next morning, Margaret called Claire to the stand. Claire walked to the witness box. Her legs felt like water. She was sworn in, sat down, looked out at the courtroom, at Preston, who was staring at her with open contempt, at the jury, who looked skeptical, at the reporters, ready to rip apart every word. Margaret started gently. Claire, how did you meet Evelyn Marshall Hartwell? She came into the diner. One Tuesday morning. She ordered water and sat alone for a long time. What did you think when you saw her? I thought she looked lonely, and like maybe she was trying to decide if she could afford to eat. So you brought her soup? Yes. I told her the kitchen made extra. It was a lie. I paid for it myself. Why? Claire's throat tightened. Because I know what it's like to count every dollar, to be hungry and try to hide it. I couldn't just not help. Margaret walked through the timeline. The Tuesday morning visits. The brief conversations. How Claire never asked personal questions. Never knew Evelyn's last name or anything about her wealth. Did you know she was rich? Margaret asked. No, not until the lawyers told me. Did you ever expect anything from her? No, I liked her. She reminded me of my grandfather. Then Cole stood for cross-examination. He approached slowly, like a predator. Ms. Dawson, you had $47,000 in medical debt, correct? Yes. You were facing eviction? I was behind on rent, yes. So you were desperate for money. I was struggling. A lot of people are. And then you met a wealthy elderly woman. I met a person who happened to be worth $340 million. I didn't know that. How convenient. Cole pulled out photos. Claire's debt notices. Collection letters. You're telling this jury that despite overwhelming financial desperation, you befriended this woman, brought her food multiple times, engaged her in conversation, made her feel special, and you never once thought about what you might gain? I didn't. How much did the soup cost? What? The soup you brought her. You paid for it yourself. How much? $6.50. And how much did you inherit? $340 million? Claire's voice broke. The courtroom was silent. Cole stared at her, waiting for her to crumble. $340 million from a $6.50 bowl of soup. That's quite a return on investment, isn't it? It wasn't an investment. It was kindness. Kindness. Cole's voice dripped with contempt. Tell me, Ms. Dawson, how many other customers did you buy meals for? I don't know. A few. But none of them left you $340 million, did they? Objection, Margaret said. Argumentative. Sustained. But the damage was done. Cole walked back to his table. No further questions. Claire left the stand feeling like she'd been stripped bare. The jury wouldn't look at her. Preston was smiling. Margaret called her witnesses, the diner regulars. Tommy testified about all the times Claire had covered his meals. Mr. Peterson described how she'd sit with him, listen to stories about his late wife, never rushing him even when the diner was busy. Marcus, the homeless man, took the stand. He was cleaned up for court, wearing a suit someone had donated, but his hands still shook. "How do you know Miss Dawson?" Margaret asked. "She fed me," Marcus said simply. "Every Friday for 2 years. Toast, eggs, coffee. Told me the kitchen was throwing it out anyway. I knew it was a lie. I knew she was paying for it, but she let me keep my dignity." "Did she ever ask you for anything in return?" "Never. She just saw me. Most people look right through homeless folks. She looked at me like I was human." Margaret showed the jury receipts. Claire's own credit card statements showing payments to the diner on her days off. Money she didn't have, spent feeding people who couldn't pay. But Preston's team had done their damage. The jury still looked skeptical. That night, Margaret came to Claire's apartment. She looked exhausted. "We're losing," Claire said. "Not yet. Tomorrow's our last day. I have one more witness, and I have the video. Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's everything we have." The final day of trial started with Margaret calling Dr. Sarah Kim to the stand. She was Evelyn's neurologist, 53 years old, Korean-American. She'd been treating Evelyn for 15 years. "Dr. Kim, you diagnosed Mrs. Hartwell with early-stage dementia in February of last year, correct?" "Yes." "Can you explain what that diagnosis meant?" Dr. Kim adjusted her glasses. "Early-stage dementia is a preliminary finding based on initial cognitive screening. Mrs. Hartwell showed some minor memory lapses, forgetting names occasionally, needing reminders for appointments. But her executive function, her ability to reason, plan, and make complex decisions, remained intact." "Did you conduct follow-up testing?" "Yes, every 2 months. Mrs. Hartwell was very proactive about monitoring her condition." "And what did those tests show?" "Her cognitive function actually improved with treatment and lifestyle changes. By October, when she changed her will, she was scoring above average for her age group on all measures." Margaret pulled out medical records. "These are the cognitive tests from October 23rd, 2 days before Mrs. Hartwell updated her will. Can you explain these scores?" Dr. Kim reviewed the documents. She scored in the 95th percentile for memory, reasoning, and judgment. There's no indication of impairment that would affect her decision-making capacity. Cole stood. "But doctor, isn't it true that dementia patients can have good days and bad days? That they can appear lucid while experiencing significant cognitive decline?" "In advanced stages, yes. But Mrs. Hartwell wasn't in advanced stages. Her test results were consistent over multiple sessions. This wasn't luck, it was her baseline." No further questions. Margaret stood again. "Dr. Kim, did Mrs. Hartwell request these cognitive evaluations for a specific purpose?" "Yes. She told me she was updating her will and wanted documentation of her mental competency. She specifically asked for comprehensive testing." "Why would she do that?" "She said she anticipated legal challenges. She wanted to make sure there was no question about her capacity to make this decision." The jury was paying attention now, really paying attention. Margaret walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, the defense would like to present video evidence." A screen was set up. The lights dimmed. Margaret pressed play. The video showed an office. Evelyn sat in a leather chair across from a desk. The timestamp read October 29th, 2024, 2 weeks before she died. She looked thin, fragile, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "My name is Evelyn Marshall Hartwell," she said to the camera. Her voice was steady, strong. "I'm recording this of my own free will and complete mental capacity. I know what I'm about to do will cause problems. I know my family will fight. So I'm creating this record now while I still can." The courtroom was silent. Everyone stared at the screen. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. "I've lived 82 years, built a fortune, surrounded myself with people who claim to care about me. But in my final months, I wanted to know something. I wanted to know if kindness still existed. Real kindness. The kind that expects nothing in return." She paused, gathering strength. "So I conducted an experiment. I attended charity events dressed in worn clothes. My friends, people I'd known for 40 years, didn't recognize me. When I approached them, they called security. I went to my country club pretending to be someone's poor relative. They asked me to leave. I tested everyone in my life, my social circle, my foundation board, my family. Her voice hardened on the last word. They all failed, every single one. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Preston, my nephew, visited me once in 5 years, and that was to ask for money. He took it and left. Didn't call to check on me. Didn't visit again. When I was diagnosed with cancer, he sent a card. That's it, a card. She took a breath. Then I met Claire Dawson. She was a waitress at a diner in Selwood. I watched her for 3 weeks before I ever spoke to her. I watched her pay for a homeless man's breakfast every Friday from her own tips. I watched her sit with an elderly man who was lonely, listening to stories about his dead wife even when she was busy. I watched her give a construction worker his meal when he came up short on change. She did these things when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. So I tested her. I came and dressed as someone with nothing, ordered only water, and she brought me soup, said the kitchen made extra. I knew it was a lie. I knew she was paying for it herself. $6.50 she couldn't afford to lose. She did it anyway. The camera stayed on Evelyn's face. I came back every Tuesday for 3 weeks. She fed me every time. We talked about books, about her daughter, about nothing important. She never asked who I was, never asked for anything. She just saw me. For the first time in decades, someone saw me as a person instead of a bank account. Evelyn wiped her eyes. This inheritance isn't random. It isn't the confused decision of a dying woman. It's the most carefully considered choice of my life. I've documented everything. My observations of Claire, my cognitive testing, my reasoning. I'm leaving her everything because she earned it, not through blood or manipulation, but through character. Her voice grew stronger. If you're watching this video, it means Preston is contesting my will. It means he's claiming I wasn't competent. Let me be absolutely clear. I have never been more certain of anything. Claire Dawson has more moral authority in her exhausted kindness than my entire family has in their genealogy. Character isn't inherited through blood. It's demonstrated through action. Evelyn looked directly into the camera. Preston, if you're watching this, know that contesting this will prove exactly why you don't deserve it. You're fighting for money you never earned, given by a woman you never loved. Claire doesn't need to fight for this inheritance. She already won it by being the kind of person you'll never be. The video ended. The courtroom was dead silent. Several jurors were crying. Preston's face had gone white. Margaret let the silence stretch. Then she spoke quietly. That was Evelyn Marshall Hartwell, 2 weeks before she died. Sound of mind, clear in her purpose, defending her choice. She turned to the jury. The plaintiff wants you to believe that Evelyn was confused, manipulated, incompetent. But you just heard from Evelyn herself. This wasn't confusion. This was clarity. This wasn't manipulation. This was justice. Margaret walked back to her table. The defense rests. Judge Morrison called a recess. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Claire sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. She just watched Evelyn defend her from beyond the grave. When court reconvened, Margaret had one more move. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence regarding Mr. Hartwell's financial situation. Cole jumped up. Objection. This is irrelevant to the question of mental competency. It's relevant to motive, Margaret said. Mr. Hartwell claims he's protecting his aunt's legacy. I'd like to show what he's actually protecting. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it. Briefly, Margaret pulled out documents. Financial records Tom had obtained. She walked through Preston's embezzlement. The $2 million stolen from Hartwell Technologies. The payment plan he was behind on. The deadline approaching. Mr. Hartwell needs this inheritance, Margaret said. Not to honor his aunt's memory. To cover his crimes. Preston's attorney tried to object, but the damage was done. The jury was looking at Preston with open disgust. Margaret called Preston to the stand for cross-examination. He walked up confidently, still playing the grieving nephew. But there was sweat on his forehead now. Mr. Hartwell, when did you last visit your aunt before she died? I visited regularly. That's not what I asked. When was the last time? Preston hesitated. I'm not sure of the exact date. Margaret pulled out phone records. According to her phone logs, you called her once in a year before she died. October 12th. That call lasted 3 minutes. What did you discuss? I don't recall. I have the recording. She kept recordings of all her calls. Would you like me to play it? Preston's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. You asked her for money. $30,000. She said no. You hung up. That was your last contact with her before she died. I was busy. Too busy to visit your dying aunt. I didn't know she was dying. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer in February. She sent you a letter informing you. We have the certified mail receipt with your signature. Preston said nothing. You knew she was dying and you visited 0 times. Called once. To ask for money. Is that correct? My relationship with my aunt was complicated. It doesn't sound complicated. It sounds like you didn't have a relationship at all. Margaret walked closer. Mr. Hartwell, how long has it been since you worked? I retired from Hartwell Technologies 2 years ago. You were fired for embezzlement. True or false? Cole stood. Objection. Sustained. Counselor, be careful. Margaret rephrased. You left Hartwell Technologies after financial irregularities were discovered. Yes or no? Preston's face flushed. There was a misunderstanding about vendor payments. A $2 million misunderstanding. It was resolved privately because the company didn't want bad publicity. But you still owe them $1.8 million, don't you? Preston didn't answer. Margaret pulled out documents. Your payment plan requires a lump sum of $1 million by December 31st. That's 2 weeks from now. If you don't pay, the company will press criminal charges. Isn't that correct? I have resources. Your only resource is this inheritance. That's why you're fighting so hard. Not for your aunt's legacy. To save yourself from prison. Margaret leaned on the witness box. Let me ask you something simple, Mr. Hartwell. Did you love your aunt? Preston opened his mouth. Closed it. Of course I did. Then why didn't you visit her when she was dying? I told you I was busy. Too busy to see someone you loved one last time? Preston's facade cracked. She was difficult. She judged everyone. Nothing was ever good enough for her. So you didn't love her. You resented her. I didn't say that. But it's true, isn't it? You resented that she had money and you didn't. You resented that she wouldn't just give it to you. You considered her fortune your birthright. It should have been mine. The words exploded out of him. The courtroom went silent. Preston realized what he'd said. Tried to backtrack. I meant the family fortune should stay in the family. Why? Margaret asked quietly. What did you do to earn it? Preston had no answer. No further questions. Margaret called Claire back to the stand. Claire walked up slowly. She'd cried through most of the testimony. Her eyes were red. Margaret's voice was gentle. Claire, tell the jury about Evelyn. Not about the money. About her. Claire took a breath. She was lonely. You could see it in her eyes. Like she'd spent her whole life surrounded by people, but always alone. When we talked, she'd light up. Not because I was special. Just because someone was actually listening. What did you talk about? Books mostly. She loved mysteries. Agatha Christie. She'd tell me about the plots, and I'd tell her about the books I read to Emma. We talked about Emma's drawings. About the weather. Nothing important. Did she ever mention her wealth? Never. I didn't know. I just knew she seemed sad. Like she was carrying something heavy. Claire's voice broke. She asked me once if I believed people were basically good. I said yes. She smiled and said she hoped I was right. I think she'd been testing that her whole life. And everyone kept proving her wrong. Until she didn't want to believe it anymore. Margaret nodded. What did Evelyn give you, Claire? Not money. I mean, yes, the inheritance, but that's not what I mean. She gave me proof that being kind matters. That seeing people matters. My whole life, I've been invisible. Just another waitress. Another struggling single mom. Nobody special. But Evelyn saw me. Really saw me. And she thought I was worth something. Claire looked at the jury. I didn't manipulate her. I didn't trick her. I just treated her like a person. And apparently, that was so rare in her life that it meant everything. That's what she gave me. The knowledge that kindness, real simple kindness, still matters in a world that tries to tell you it doesn't. The jury was listening. really listening. The money doesn't change who she was to me, Claire said. She was a lonely old woman who needed someone to see her. I was a tired waitress who needed to believe treating people with dignity still meant something. We gave each other that, and I'll honor her memory whether I inherit anything or not. Because she mattered. Not her money. Her. Margaret let that answer sit. Thank you, Claire. Closing arguments were brief. Cole tried to salvage his case, but the video had destroyed him. You couldn't argue with Evelyn's own testimony. Margaret kept it simple. Evelyn Marshall Hartwell was brilliant until the day she died. She made a choice. A clear, documented, rational choice. She chose character over blood. Kindness over entitlement. Claire Dawson over Preston Hartwell. The only question is whether you'll respect that choice or overturn it because it doesn't fit your expectations of who deserves wealth. The jury went to deliberate at 3:47 p.m. Claire sat outside the courtroom with Margaret. Emma was with the neighbor. Reporters swarmed, but bailiffs kept them back. How long? Claire asked. Could be hours. Could be days. It was 90 minutes. At 5:17 p.m., the bailiff came out. Jury's back. Claire's heart stopped. 90 minutes was fast. Too fast. That meant they'd made up their minds quickly. She didn't know if that was good or bad. They filed back into the courtroom. Claire couldn't read their faces. They wouldn't look at her. That had to be bad. Judge Morrison entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. An older black man who'd been taking notes throughout the trial. We have, Your Honor. What say you? In the matter of the Marshall Hartwell estate challenge, we find in favor of the defendant, Claire Dawson. The will is valid. The courtroom erupted. Claire's knees buckled. Margaret grabbed her arm, steadying her. Reporters rushed for the doors. Preston sat frozen, his face ashen. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order, order in this court. She turned to the jury. Thank you for your service. The will stands as written. Ms. Dawson is the rightful heir to the Marshall Hartwell estate. This court is adjourned. Claire couldn't process it, couldn't breathe. She'd won. Evelyn's choice had been upheld. Margaret hugged her. You did it. We did it, Claire whispered. Outside, the media was chaos. Cameras, questions, shouted from every direction. Margaret guided Claire through, saying no comment, over and over. But one reporter's question cut through. Ms. Dawson, what will you do with $340 million? Claire stopped, turned, looked directly at the camera. I'm going to honor Evelyn's legacy, she said, by finding more people like me, people who show kindness without expecting anything in return and making sure they're seen. That soundbite would run on every news station in the country. If you love seeing justice delivered to people who think privilege protect them, subscribe. This channel is built on these moments where character defeats entitlement. Preston's attorneys filed an appeal the next day, but the video had destroyed their case. More importantly, Tom's investigation had triggered a criminal probe into the embezzlement. Within a week, federal investigators were looking into Preston's finances. He settled fast, admitted to the fraud, surrendered all claims to Evelyn's estate. In exchange, the prosecution recommended probation instead of prison time. He'd pay back what he stole and disappear from public life. Claire never saw him again. The inheritance transferred officially on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Rebecca called with the news. It's done. The full estate is now legally yours. $340 million in liquid assets. The mansion, investment portfolios, everything. Claire was at the diner when she got the call. Still working. Still bringing people coffee and eggs. The other servers thought she was crazy. Why are you still here? One asked. You're a millionaire. Multi-millionaire, Claire corrected. Then laughed because that word sounded absurd coming from her mouth. Truth was, she didn't know what else to do. The diner was familiar, real. The rest of her life felt like someone else's dream. She cut her hours to 3 days a week. Wednesdays, Fridays, Sundays. She needed to stay grounded. Needed to remember who she was before Evelyn changed everything. Emma's medical debt was the first thing she paid. $47,000 cleared in one payment. Then she set up a trust fund for Emma's education. College, graduate school if she wanted. Emma would never have to worry about money the way Claire had. But the real work was the foundation. The Evelyn Marshall Foundation launched in March. Its mission: identify and support invisible helpers. People who showed extraordinary kindness without recognition. Service workers who paid for customers' meals. Nurses who stayed late with patients. Teachers who bought supplies with their own money. People who made the world better in small, unnoticed ways. The foundation would pay off their debt, cover their medical bills, fund their education, give them the financial security to keep being kind without it costing them everything. Claire hired Margaret to run it. She was the perfect person. She understood what it meant to fight for people the system overlooked. They created an application process, but they also had investigators, like Tom, who actively looked for helpers. People who didn't even know they were being considered. Just like Evelyn had done with Claire. The first recipient was Marcus. Claire found him at the same spot he'd always occupied on the corner near the diner. He recognized her immediately. "Heard you won," he said. "Saw it on the news. Good for you. Marcus, I want to offer you something." She explained the foundation. Housing, job training, a fresh start. No strings attached. Marcus cried, actual tears running down his weathered face. "Why me?" "Because Evelyn taught me that inheritance isn't about who you're related to. It's about who you choose to lift up, and I'm choosing you." Within a month, Marcus had an apartment, a job at a community center helping other homeless people transition to housing. He thrived. When Claire visited him, he showed her his apartment with such pride she had to fight back tears. "I'm paying it forward," he told her, "helping folks the way you helped me." That's what Evelyn had wanted. Not charity that created dependency. Investment that created more kindness. The foundation's first year changed 147 lives. Single mothers with medical debt. Elderly people facing eviction. Teachers, nurses, social workers. All people who gave more than they took. All invisible until someone chose to see them. Claire did interviews about the work. She was careful never to make it about herself. Always about Evelyn. About the experiment. About proving that character mattered. Evelyn spent her whole life surrounded by wealth, Claire told one reporter. But she died alone. She had everything money could buy. But what she wanted most was proof that people could still be good without expecting payment. That's what the foundation does. It finds that goodness and rewards it. The story went viral. Not for scandal this time, but for hope. People submitted nominations by the thousands. Stories of kindness from every corner of the country. Proof that Evelyn had been right. Good people existed. They were just invisible until someone looked. 6 months after the trial, Claire still lived in her apartment. She'd thought about moving. Could afford anything now. But Emma liked her school. Claire liked her neighborhood. They stayed. The money sat mostly untouched in investment accounts. Claire took a salary from the foundation. Enough to be comfortable, but not extravagant. Everything else went to the work. "You could buy anything," Margaret said once. "Travel the world. Never work again." "No," Claire said, "but that's not what this is about." What it was about was harder to explain. It was about honoring Evelyn. About making sure her experiment didn't end with Claire. About proving that the world Evelyn had hoped existed, where kindness was valued and rewarded, could actually be built. One Tuesday in August, almost a year after Evelyn died, Claire was working at the diner when a woman came in. Elderly, well-dressed but not flashy. She ordered tea and sat alone in the corner booth. Evelyn's booth. Claire's heart seized. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The woman looked up and smiled. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Yes," Claire managed. "Can I get you anything else?" "No, dear. Just tea. Unless, do you have soup?" Claire's hands trembled. "Chicken noodle?" "Perfect." Claire brought her soup. The woman thanked her and ate slowly, looking out the window just like Evelyn used to. When she left, she handed Claire a note with a generous tip. "You remind me of someone," the woman said. "Someone very special." After she was gone, Claire unfolded the note. "Some of us are still watching. Keep doing what you're doing. E.M.F. Evelyn Marshall Foundation." Claire's eyes blurred. Somewhere, someone was carrying on Evelyn's experiment, testing people, looking for kindness. And they'd just let Claire know she was still passing. But there was one more thing. One final piece of Evelyn's story that Claire didn't know yet. Rebecca called her that evening. Can you come to the estate tomorrow? There's something I need to show you. Something Evelyn left specific instructions about. What is it? You'll see. Come in the morning. Claire couldn't sleep that night. What else could Evelyn have left? She'd already given Claire everything. But there was one final surprise Evelyn left. Something that would explain why she chose Portland, chose that diner, chose Claire specifically. Something that would change everything Claire thought she knew about coincidence and fate. Rebecca met Claire at the mansion the next morning. They walked through the familiar rooms to Evelyn's bedroom. Rebecca opened the closet and pulled out a locked metal box from the top shelf. Evelyn's instructions were very specific, Rebecca said. This box was to be given to you after the foundation was established, after you'd proven what you'd do with the inheritance. Proven to who? She's gone. To yourself, maybe. Rebecca handed her a key. She wanted you to open it alone. Rebecca left. Claire sat on Evelyn's bed, holding the box. It was heavy, old, the kind of thing that held important documents. She turned the key. The lock clicked. Inside were photographs, letters, and a sealed envelope addressed to her. Claire pulled out the photos first. Black and white. Military pictures from decades ago. A young man in uniform. He looked familiar, but Claire couldn't place why. Then she saw the name tag. Dawson. Her breath caught. She looked closer at the face, at the eyes. It was her grandfather, Samuel Dawson, but he died when she was 19. What was his picture doing in Evelyn's private collection? She pulled out more photos. Samuel and another soldier. Also young. Also in uniform. Vietnam based on the jungle background. Then a photo of Samuel and that other soldier together. Arms around each other's shoulders. Friends. Brothers in arms. Claire turned one photo over. Handwriting on the back. Samuel and Evie. Danang, 1968. Evelyn. Claire's hands shook as she pulled out the letters. Dozens of them. Correspondence between Samuel Dawson and Evelyn Marshall going back to 1968. She read the first one. Samuel's handwriting. Familiar from birthday cards he'd sent her as a child. Dear Evie, made it home safe. Can't believe we actually survived. You saved my life more times than I can count. Promise me you'll stay in touch. You're the best friend I ever had. Sam. The next letter was Evelyn's response. Elegant handwriting, young and hopeful. Dear Sam, I'm so glad you're home. I think about the war every day, about what we survived. You saved my life too. That day in Danang when the ambush happened. If you hadn't pulled me behind that wall, I wouldn't be here. I owe you everything. Let's not lose touch. You're family to me. Evelyn. Claire read through decades of letters. They'd stayed in touch through the 70s. Samuel wrote about becoming a janitor, meeting his wife, having a daughter, Claire's mother. Evelyn wrote about building Hartwell Technologies, her marriage to Richard, the loneliness of wealth. Then the letters grew less frequent. Life got busy. Samuel's wife died. His daughter, Claire's mother, left him with baby Claire and never came back. The letters stopped in the early 90s. The last letter from Samuel was dated 2006, the year before he died. Dear Evelyn, I know it's been years. I'm not good at keeping in touch, but I wanted you to know about my granddaughter, Claire. She's 14 now. Smart as hell. Kind too. Reminds me of you. She's everything good I tried to put in the world. I'm sick now. Won't be around much longer. But if you ever find her, tell her the old man was proud. Sam. Claire's vision blurred. Tears fell on the yellow paper. She pulled out the final envelope. It was sealed. Recent. Her name written in Evelyn's handwriting. She opened it with trembling hands. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, you've already built a foundation. You've already proven what I believed about you. Now you deserve to know the truth. I didn't find you by accident. 50 years ago, your grandfather saved my life. We were in Vietnam together. I was an intelligence officer. He was infantry. During an ambush in Danang, he pulled me behind cover and held off the enemy while I radioed for help. He took a bullet meant for me. Nearly died. I owed him everything. We stayed in touch for decades. But life separated us. He had his world. I had mine. When he wrote to me about you in 2006, I tried to find you, but I was too late. He died before I could locate you. I spent the next 18 years looking. I hired investigators, tracked your mother, who led nowhere. Finally found you 3 years ago, working at that diner, raising your daughter alone. I watched from a distance, saw how you treated people, how you showed kindness the same way Sam did, like it was automatic, like being decent was just what you did. When I got my diagnosis, I knew what I had to do. I owed Sam a debt I could never repay to him, but I could pay it to you, to his legacy. The inheritance was never charity. It was repayment for the life he gave me, for the years I got to build my fortune because he saved me that day in Danang. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know you'd earned it through who you are, not just through blood. So I tested you the same way I tested everyone else. And you passed. Not because you're Sam's granddaughter, but because you're exactly who he raised you to be. This inheritance is yours by right. You earned it through character, through kindness, through being the legacy of the best man I ever knew. Your grandfather taught you that everyone deserves dignity. You lived that lesson. Now you have the resources to teach it to the world. I'm gone now, but Sam's spirit lives on in you, and in everyone you choose to help. That's the real inheritance, not the money. The choice to see people and lift them up. Make them proud, Claire. You already have. With love and gratitude. Evelyn. Claire sat on the bed, holding the letter, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. It wasn't random. None of it was random. Evelyn had been looking for her for 18 years, had found her, had watched her, had tested her to make sure Samuel's granddaughter was worthy of honoring his memory. The kindness wasn't coincidence. It was inherited, passed down from a grandfather who taught her that seeing people mattered, recognized by a woman whose life he'd saved half a century ago. Claire looked at the photos, at Samuel and Evelyn, young and alive, arms around each other in a war zone. Two people who'd survived held together. And 50 years later, one had repaid the debt to the other's granddaughter. She went back to the diner that afternoon. Her shift wasn't until tomorrow, but she needed to be there, needed the familiar sounds and smells, needed to ground herself in the world before Evelyn changed everything. She sat in the corner booth, Evelyn's booth, her booth now. A young man came in, college age. He looked nervous, sat at the counter and stared at the menu like he was doing math. The waitress on duty brought him water. He ordered it and nothing else. Claire watched, saw him check his wallet, count bills, put them back. He was trying to decide if he could afford to eat. Claire stood up, walked to the counter, told the waitress to bring him soup and a sandwich. I didn't order that, the young man said. I know, Claire said. Kitchen made extra. It'll just go to waste. She smiled. The same smile Evelyn must have seen. The same lie Evelyn had heard. The young man's eyes got shiny. Thank you. Claire nodded, went back to her booth, watched him eat like every bite mattered. She knew how this story goes now. Kindness compounds. It passes from person to person, from generation to generation, from a soldier in Vietnam to his granddaughter to a stranger in a diner to whoever came next. Evelyn had proven it. Claire would carry it forward, and someone else would receive it and pass it on. That was the real inheritance. Not money or blood. The choice to see people. The choice to help. The choice to believe that kindness matters, even when the world tries to tell you it doesn't. Claire pulled out her phone, took a photo of the booth, posted it with a caption. Evelyn sat here, changed my life. Now I sit here and look for the next person who needs to know they're seen. The inheritance continues. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what you receive. It's what you choose to pass forward. Evelyn gave Claire money. Yes. But more importantly, she gave her proof that kindness creates kindness, that seeing people matters, that character is the only currency that appreciates forever. Claire learned that inheritance isn't about money or blood. It's about recognizing and rewarding the character that makes humanity worth saving. Evelyn knew this all along. The fortune was never the gift. The gift was proving that seeing people, truly seeing them, matters more than wealth ever could. If this story mattered to you, subscribe to never miss stories about ordinary people who prove character is the only currency that appreciates forever.